Ireland having a go. But then at the end, with Ireland, one or two players started me off. Again, not training properly.
So Roy Keane was an absolute world-class footballer. He was a world-class captain, and he could walk into any team in his prime now. But sometimes, well, very rarely do you get a world-class player becoming a world-class manager. And Roy Keane has had a very average career as a coach. He's a better pundit than he is a coach. Well, I mean, can you call him a pundit, or is he more a pantomime villain? But in this next clip, you will see examples of why Roy Keane wasn't a good manager. Here's Roy.
I saw myself as a manager. Doesn't mean say you can't do any coaching. Of course you do. Yeah. But I didn't have the passion for coaching that some of my staff had. Yeah. So I enjoyed that stepping back a little bit and maybe watching the sessions and not being in the middle of it. And the good thing about Ireland, you're on about being clear in your head. So we'd go away obviously for a week or two. You have them 2 games. Nothing else mattered. You weren't worried about, when you're at club level, it's about the medical staff, contracts, bonuses, academy.
It's cleaner.
It's like, we just focus on that match.
Yeah.
Nothing is going to interrupt us this week. You're in the hotel. And obviously I was working with Martin, who I thought Martin O'Neill, you're on about working with people. And not many people have given me breaks in football, let me tell you. But Martin gave me a break by bringing me back in with Ireland. Yeah. And I was able to do a little bit of coaching.
I was surprised you as assistant.
At international level, it's fine.
Yeah.
I tried it at Villa with Paul. I went to Forest with Martin, and not for me. I would never again. Do you know, not at any level.
Just because you weren't making the decisions on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I was missing that. But the good thing with Martin was Martin's experience. He kind of was. You were a feeling. Obviously, I knew he was making the final decision, but he was listening, Gary.
Yeah.
And he was great company, and he'd done a great job. Yeah. And we had a good group of players who were like turning up for Ireland, having a go. But then at the end, with Ireland, one or two players started me off. Again, not training properly, talking a good game. And then, I eventually fell out with one or two players, which I think is part of the game. I think you're supposed to follow. When people don't follow with people, I go, you're not challenging each other, pushing each other.
Do you feel like people throw your name in just because it's a cheap shot and it's a headline?
I think so. I think some players, I've heard some players saying they fell out with me, and I go, I never fell out with you. I think they enjoy the buzz going, they challenged me. No, I fell out one or two players with Ireland because they were turning up, and guess what? Not wanting to train. Yeah. And I was looking at all their stats, and I watched these players every week, and I was looking going, you're not playing, and you don't want to train, you're idiots. But these lads were idiots anyway. People think, just because they're footballers. No, they'd be idiots if they're walking on the building site. They were just time wasters, and I couldn't tolerate them. And I think it was my job to challenge them. Did I challenge them sometimes in the wrong way? Maybe. Did I try and motivate them? Sometimes you get that wrong, but that's management and coaching. Yeah. And sometimes you get it right, sometimes you get it wrong. But you're thinking they might want to listen to me. They might realise I've played at a high level. I've managed at a high level. I might have something to add, but they're just, no, gone.
Is that because as well with Ireland that they're just going back to the clubs as well? You haven't got that attachment to them really?
But I think that's a good thing as well.
Yeah.
I got a phone call one time after an international match. One of the players never turned back up at his club. And the manager rang me, said, such a person, I won't mention who. I was like, I couldn't care less where he is. We finished with him last night. I don't care if he's been kidnapped. It's your own problem. Don't be bringing that to me. But that's the beauty of international football. You have him for the week.
Where was
10 days.
Where was it?
I think he's been drinking somewhere. Yeah. Listen. But the guy previous. But I still think the manager, why are you ringing me as if I know where he is? I felt like I've done my work last time. I'm relaxing. Again, find him yourself. And obviously he turned up a few days later.
The Mick McCarthy one that you talked about before, that emanated though from when you was a player as well. Did that?
Probably so. Yeah, when I was a player. But again, when you remember I remember going to the senior squad with Ireland, and I don't expect fellas to babysit you, but some players don't go to the way to help you, don't you?
So it seems to me that Roy Keane just doesn't have the temperament to be a manager. His communication skills are very one-dimensional. You can imagine he's looking at some of those players who are not training as well as he feels as though they should train, because he feels as though they should train as hard as he used to train. And Roy Keane was an animal. He was an animal. I mean, was there anyone that trained as hard as Roy Keane? I mean, that was one of the reasons that made him a world-class player, because he was so dedicated. But I don't think Roy Keane can get his head round the fact that there are players with different personalities. And it's understanding that nuance that separates the great managers from the good ones, and the good ones from the bad ones. Alex Ferguson himself says that his number one strength as a coach was communication. And he understood that you had to communicate, not necessarily treat, but communicate differently with different players. Some people needed a kick up the backside. Some people needed a conversation. Some people needed a little bit of empathy and an arm around the shoulder. And it sounds here just Roy Keane's sort of attitude to the players that he's talking about there. Oh, they pissed us off, and I just had enough, and you know, it just seemed to me that Roy Keane just didn't quite understand how to get the best out of players. Because that's what it's about. It's about motivating players. And his style would have been very good for certain players, but particularly in this day and age that players are just softer now. There's also that notion that great players sometimes don't understand how other players might find it difficult to do the things on the pitch that players like Roy Keane find so easy. That was one of the problems that Sir Bobby Charlton had from something that I read years ago. He tried his hand at management. I think he was at Preston North End, and he very quickly realised it wasn't for him because he just couldn't understand that other players just weren't as good as he was. And that's fair enough. I mean, who was as good as Bobby Charlton? Who was as good as Roy Keane? But I think the lesson to learn here from Roy and this clip is not everyone's cut out to be a world-class player. And the same is true for management. And in Roy Keane's case, he's nowhere near as good a manager as he was a player. But what do you guys think? But what do you guys think? Was he dealt a bad hand? Could Roy have done better? Was he capable of doing better? Would you have him in charge of Man United now? I know my answer to that. But as always, put everything in the comments. See you on the next one.